On behalf of the Appointments Committee, I would like to welcome Dr. James Powell to our campus today. Just a little background on himself. He received his BA in Religion from Northwestern University, MA and BA from Cambridge, Master's from University of Chicago, and his PhD from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He's currently teaching online for Central Michigan University and also an instructor in the University of Wisconsin colleges. Each candidate was given a topic. They were allowed to choose at their discretion one religiously significant topic and explain how it is explored or assessed differently from the perspective of different disciplines. So Dr. Powell's topic is right there, which he will be sharing with you today. So welcome, Dr. Powell.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here, and one thing not mentioned was my background as a child. Dad was an existentialist liberal Protestant minister, so I was raised on Kierkegaard and Tillich, hence the gloomy topic, death. His favorite books were The Fear and Trembling and the tremendous sequel, The Sickness Unto Death. So, I've got a little morbid take on religion, but I think since we all face the prospect of death, what better topic than to discuss death and tie it in with interdisciplinary studies. And of course, with death comes the sacred. And we know in the world today, we see people blowing up other people, killing for their idea of the sacred. It could be abortion clinics are blown up. Suicide bombers, or in the East Asian case, we had the famous subway gassings. And people are killing because of what is in their mind as the sacred. And I'll hope to clarify that topic. And I guess, I can point out the church pew effect already here. Although, I like to roam the room so nobody escapes. All right. I don't sound as godlike, but it's a little better. So we have here, this is the topic. We're going to look at the sacred and death from a variety of angles. It'll be pretty simple for the economists, psychologists, even kinesthetic studies types. So let's start into this with this amazing map. And when we look at a map like that, well, what's really going on? Why do all these people share the same beliefs? How is it that they're all Christian or Buddhist or Hindu or Muslim? And how these form sacred canopies for these cultures is an important topic. But how do we get there is the beginning of my talk. And so, I want to start with this man who's influenced my pedagogy tremendously, and hence my reliance on audio-visual teaching methods. And also, course assessment techniques that have students engaging in in-class debates and the like. Peer-to-peer assessments are very important for my teaching. And so the audio visuals, I don't know how I could teach without these images anymore. I just don't need notes because the pictures say more than 1,000 words. So Howard Gardner really comes up with all these different types of intelligence. And sure enough, I found it's true. Some students can write and think intellectually. Others can produce audio-visual projects that I have them produce in class, documentaries. And excel at that. So it's not the case anymore that there are intelligent people and unintelligent people. The question Howard Gardner has raised for me is, in what way are we all intelligent, and to what levels? Because I'll tell you one thing, when it comes to the mathematical, I'm pretty low on that scale. Maybe the existential low, I might have a little better job on that one. So we'll look at that, and already I learned in an accelerated training that I took that, in fact, mere visuals teach a whole lot. So we looked at this map, but this map has human faces to go with it. And so we can say this is a sort of hypnotic learning, even with no no text up here, we can look at this shaman and we can take in something of the earliest religions known to humankind. This is the native religion, the natural religion of Homo sapiens. And so Mircea Eliade, who's a giant in my field, studied all kinds of shamans around the world and found the sacred centers in every culture, the sacred figures, the rituals, the places, and all of this. So we can look at, this is sort of the outline of my course too. We start here, and I look at religion as an evolutionary process. So it's an evolutionary rubric I use in teaching these religions, and that brings us to this, where we can see Gilgamesh and Enkidu defeating the bull of heaven. Look at the religion of ancient city-states. So there we're looking at 4 seats of civilization, starting with Sumer, which begins Babylon, and then from there, I like to say, civilization progresses like a virus. In fact, the whole book of Genesis is largely, in the Cain and Abel story, the conflict between agricultural Cain and nomadic Abel. And so that's really what's going on. This tremendous transition from humans as wandering hunter-gatherer nomads to city-states and the features of those religions. Now, I don't want to dwell too much on those, but that brings us to Krishna. And when we look at this face of Indian culture, the majority of Hindus are Vaishnavas, or they follow Vishnu, who manifests avatars of Krishna. Then we can see, I like to call it the religion of play. And sure enough, Hindus will tell you everything going on in this room and all over the planet is the divine play of Vishnu. And so we look at this face and we put a face on that blob of blue we saw on the world map, and we see something quite different as a face of really nearly 1 billion people. And so that brings us to Jainism. Very few in number, but as influential as the Jewish faith is for the Abrahamic religions. So I include it because I'm pretty convinced they go back to the original Indus Valley civilization. It's their claim. And so we see here a very different image than we just saw. This guy is not about having, well, believe it or not, Krishna has 16,500 wives and 180,000 children. That's one of my believe it or not. You don't have to believe it, but that's what they say. This guy not only has no children, he has no clothes, because the Jain Tirthankara, as they're called, give up all belongings, including, well, they don't murder potatoes even. They eat fruits and nuts, and they live as harmless a life as possible. So I'm going to hope to crack all these guys open as we go through here. We're not done with them as we just look at them, but now we see a very rationalist, humanist philosopher. In fact, we can say these Tirthankaras, Mahavira in this case, are humanist religions. There is no God in them, and that surprises students and many to think of religions with no God, but there isn't one. So for the Buddha, maybe the gods exist, maybe they don't. The point for him and the Jains is to look within our own consciousness for truth as human beings. And hence, they're not gods like Krishna, and they're relatively rationalists too. And Krishna, well, we'll see him again, but let's just move on to China. I take students from the beginning to India first, so that we can erase Abrahamic notions of God and religion from their minds, and then we'll look at them at the end of class with new lenses is the idea there. So we're looking now at Lao Tzu, and we've got another religion without a God. And so how do we differentiate Lao Tzu, say, from the next slide we'll see with Confucius? Generally speaking, well, Lao Tzu is all about the Tao and a way of life in nature, and essentially if it feels good, you should do that, and nothing is evil. A lot of people think that yin and yang are about good and evil, but they're not. They're about the masculine and feminine energies of the universe co-abiding and balancing each other out. So less anxiety on his face, and with Confucius, with whom as a youngster, I disliked that guy. He looked like full of rules and regulations. As I get older, I'm starting to love and identify with this guy. He's so concerned about combating social chaos through his ethics and ritual traditions. So hence, he's more anxiety-ridden than allows, so that's how you tell them apart. And probably more like me, and of course, they don't call it Confucianism. It's a big thing to know. They don't call it Buddhism either. That's based on our Abrahamic assumption that every religion worships one man. They in fact call Confucianism the school of the scholars, which translates to academia, and the clergy of that religion. Now they'll say it's not a religion. I've talked to Confucian scholars, it's not a religion. But the clergy are sitting in this room, a lot of them. Faculty and government bureaucrats are the clergy for this guy, because they're the ones keeping society stable and conflict and chaos out of the way. So this one now, well, the visual tells you a lot about Judaism. There is no image there, and there shouldn't be. Christians make images of God, but Jews forbid that. And hence we've got Yahweh. I would have been stoned even for saying that 2,000 years ago. And I don't mean the plant, some smoke. These days I'm talking about death, if I said it right. But God is so transcendent and beyond our world. This is the only kosher way Jews will represent God. And see pictures in a synagogue. And of course, this man, I think we all know in this culture, Jesus is fine. We'll see the influence of Greco-Roman culture on an originally Jewish faith, and then we'll see a God-man like Dionysus or Hercules emerging in the tradition of Christianity and Jesus, and of course his notable penchant for love. He's Mr. Love in the class. Finally, Allah. Likewise with Judaism. You can't draw a picture of Muhammad or his family or any of the prophets. So this movie, Noah, is banned in several Muslim countries for this reason. God, when you put God into a human form, you've limited God. And so these visuals, I think, already demonstrate what I like to call awareness competencies. Even if we don't have a lot of time to spend defining these religions. This much, I think, in 5 minutes is pretty good. Oh, I just jumped again. And then we have science. I hate to say it, but Nietzsche, kind of big influence on me as well. And we know him, I think, as Mr. Prophet of Science, who killed God for him. Science killed God. And hence, though we might look at his face and see a bit more anxiety than we saw in the other superhero's face. But for many, he is a figure, of importance in the modern era. A lot of atheists like to cite Nietzsche. Of course, he went mad. As Freud said, some should not give up God too soon. And he's thinking of this guy. And I think he's right. Although giving up God is not necessary in my class. So, but knowing what the sacred is, that's a pretty big deal in my class. And so we've got some definitions here. I like George Lindbergh or Ortega y Gasset explain religion not just in terms of theology or doctrine. That's the old-fashioned way of looking at religion. Not only can we not say religion is belief in a supreme being, but the way we've all been raised in our culture, the way we act in every instance means, it's kind of my catchphrase, we can run from religion, but we can't hide. We're all part of religion, and I'll play a dog woman clip, a woman literally raised and socialized by dogs in the Ukraine, and she can't speak. They've taught her some words now, but she'll still apparently get on all fours, and I could dazzle you with that, and it's disturbing, but it's important to know that no matter who we are, we've been raised in a culture, we speak English, all these things. We're in a traditionally Protestant country. If we looked at the map closely, look at our presidents, who are they? Are they Catholics and Jewish people? Are they Muslims? All but one is a Protestant. How about that? And guess what? no Lutherans. Figure that out. So and that always shocks my students in Wausau. Really? No Lutherans? Well, that's kind of sad. They're Calvinist Protestants, right? So we'll look at that. Oh, wait, you didn't finish. Because the sacred doesn't have to be God. And I ask my students, what is that G up there really standing for them? And of course, actually found out that G is not for Green Bay. A student who knew her history said, Powell, that stands for greatness. I didn't know. But for a lot of Packers fans, I know it stands for the sacred, and hence it is a kind of God. And the rituals, the uniforms, all of this makes it kind of fanatical for the Packerites, as I call them. So Mircea Eliade, Rudolf Otto, phenomenologists of religion, also will tell you then that in the mind of every person is an awareness of the sacred. So it could be Packerism, or it could be a cabin in the woods. Up in Wausau, hunting season is the sacred time, and the place are their deer stands, and the whole rituals around hunting are sacred for a lot of them. So we can look at that in the mind of everyone, and then sociologically on a macro scale. Emil Durkheim taught us that religions are glues for whole societies, and Peter Berger employs the social construction of reality to see religions as sacred canopies for whole cultures. And then finally, very few in my field include the insights of Tetsuro Watsuji. But he's a Japanese thinker who realized that religions evolve in climates and environments. So this means that for him, the Abrahamic religions evolve in the desert. Hence, there we need a strong command control system to govern the water, basically, the Tigris-Euphrates. And then he goes on to analyze India and China in terms of climate as well, where the jungle is a very different place than the desert and all of this. So I think with these definitions, we can look at this. Now this is kind of grim. I have students do this on the first day of class, and it's a course assessment technique. And so a peer-to-peer assessment. And I ask them to think about, when is it okay to kill human beings? Now that's a grim topic. But in all my years of using this course assessment technique, I've only had one student say it is never okay to kill human beings. How about that? So ask yourself in your seat, how do you feel about that? We don't have time to really do it, but this engenders great debates even among the faculty of Wausau, hot and bothered, because nobody agrees completely on these issues. So these are your options. Now, so far everyone has fit into my cubby holes. I get accused of fitting people into cubby holes all the time. I can't help it. But no one escapes my cubby hole. And if you find a fifth category than these, I think there's some kind of Nobel Prize or something big for you. So recommend it in the question and answer session. But we're either theists, or else, we believe in God, an all-powerful being who's transcendent to our world, not part of it, not human in any way. You can think of Muslims, Jews, Christians. And then pantheists, really maybe a better word is monists. Hindus, Buddhists, Jains, Taoists, all of these people will tell you that in fact the divine or the sacred is immanental. There's no transcendent anything outside of the natural world we live in the world of human beings. Then that brings us to our modern options that are not really that modern. People think atheism is some 20th century thing, or that Nietzsche and the like invented that. Not true. It goes back, we see reference in the Psalms to the fool who says in his heart there is no God. Well, I'm not saying you're a fool, but the Psalms think so. So an agnostic is different from an atheist, though. So let's look at these options. There's where we find theists. I find it fascinating that they're all grouped in one side of the Eurasian continent. Why is that they share fundamental assumptions all together? And the same God of Israel, Yahweh, Jehovah, they'll all believe in that. And then here are the options. And of course, the original superhero, Moses. We could say Abraham. Even in Moses' time, we don't have pure monotheism, but we do have the start of Jehovah worship. And so when we look at Moses, what's he got in his hands there? He's got commands from a transcendentally otherworldly being, and as a prophet, he speaks for that being with the Ten Commandments and the like. So that brings us now to some options and some opinions on when we can kill other human beings. Now these superhero Catholics, St. Thomas Aquinas and Augustine both agree. We can wage defensive wars. Gotta be just. Definitions are up there if you want to see that clarified. But just because we're theists, and when I get students in their groups, and in WAS I have to split the theists up into Catholics and Protestants because there's so many Christians, and usually I kind of have to help the agnostics or atheists or pantheists make their case, because I have them discuss this in groups and then debate these issues group to group. And what we find out is this: same as in the Christian tradition, these guys say war is wrong in all instances. There is no point at which killing is justified. And so in their small groups, they find out they don't agree with all their fellow Christians on these 4 issues of when we can kill human beings, just like, well, diversity is the case then with the religions themselves. And it's not only there. Hindus, Taoists, Buddhists, we can put them all in this category. Even the Jains, reincarnation's the theme. The divine Brahman for Hindus or Dharma for the Buddhists is right here. This room is it. And everything in the natural world is part of the divine world for these Indian and then also Chinese religious thinkers. So we find them located on the eastern side of the Eurasian continent. Try to figure that out. Are there poles at work? Those are mysteries to me, but it is a fact that we can divide the classical world up that way. And then, well, Socrates, you know, he's got this idea of a divine mind and consciousness, reincarnation. It's not just strictly related to the East Asian side of things. And then we've got this view of soul as different energy centers in the Indian system. It spreads across Asia as well. These chakra energies are what reincarnate the top 4 at any rate. And here are our big thinkers for this tradition on one side of the killing issue. The Buddha is against any kind of killing at all. And there you go. Killing is evil. All these things are evil, period. And he's a total pacifist. The Jain fellow below him, sky-clad, he's clothed in the directions, north, south, east, and west. And a lot of hippies thought in the 60s when they saw these naked saints around India that, oh, well, nudism's okay in India. Try that. Oh, that's a mistake. No, it is not okay, except for these guys, because they've given up everything. And this guy, this Jain sadhu, will tell you that killing a potato is murder. Has anyone here killed a potato? Is it just me? Okay, so we've all violated their ethics. Of course, that's only for the saints of the tradition. Part of my theory of religion, I think it might be unique, is that religion is powered on by rich guys who build buildings and then by slackers, you know, who follow the superheroes. So the superheroes, they don't need religion. It's the slackers and the rich guys who need religion. So they say no killing at all. He does too. And then he does not. So what's Krishna doing here? Yeah. Right, he's telling Arjuna. Arjuna's like a warrior caste guy. He's telling him, look, man it up, are the words originally. Arjuna, you're a warrior caste guy, and even though those are your relatives you're going to kill, no worries. because they will be reborn in my divine vast consciousness. So there really is no killing. Nothing's killed, nothing dies. Although it doesn't look too good, does it? And it certainly disagrees with the Buddha and Mahavira. So that brings us to our other options. We can look, I call it soft core science agnosticism. Let's look at some superheroes. New ethics emerge with John Stuart Mill. If it's useful, so if abortion happens to raise the level of single mothers or save money or the like, it is ethical. Likewise, capital punishment. You have to assess these things. There's no divine command with this kind of ethics. And agnosticism, coined by the great purveyor of evolution, Thomas Huxley, Aldous Huxley's father, his view is like that bumper sticker. I don't know, but you don't either. Agnosticism's more aggressive than commonly thought. It's not, I just don't know about any of that. No, you can't know. It's a scientific perspective, he thinks. And I would agree with him, actually, as far as science goes. That's the one. Ruth Benedict studied Southeast Island peoples and found out that cannibalism's a pretty good thing. If you can catch a man and kill him and eat him, you are a good tribe member. And yet, we live culture to culture. Ethics differ from each culture. Abortion is a big controversial topic here, but in Japan and Korea, not a big issue because of the reincarnation belief. So it's the idea of the sacred again that governs how communities feel about ethics. So Ruth Benedict has shown the relativism of ethical perspectives. And that brings us back to this madman. Don't go on YouTube and look at his death days. He's gone by the end of it. Vacant stare. And a sad life, really, but brave and all this and influential. And he'll tell us with the hardcore view of science, religion is actually detrimental. He's not an agnostic. He thinks that if you follow a religion, you're a slave to long-dead humans. You're living their life. You're not living your own life. If God is dead, who's God? Well, I guess I'm God now, because God's dead. It's a lot of pressure on a person, isn't it? And Karl Marx is famous for this thing. Opiate of the masses, yeah, but also he goes further, and as the grandson of a rabbi, and I always like to point out he even looks like a rabbi, and he got a lot of Judaic features in his political stances, his social justice themes. He's a lot like a prophet of old, hating rituals and the like. It's the soul of a soulless world is what he thought. So these guys are all operating in an industrial age where the old religions are challenged by science and technology. And so those are options, and then we'll just throw a bone to biology, and Dawkins will tell you, hey, termites have queens, bees have queens, and a whole structure, the drones and workers, right? Pyramidal social structure. And by studying insect culture, he realized human cultures are governed the same way. So instead we have popes or Dalai Lamas and cardinals and all the way down to the common believer. So I think he's right. And then Dawkins, Mr. Anti-religion, he thinks he's not religious. He says, well, it's built into our genes. And he'll tell you that, well, you don't use your appendix anymore, right? It's vestigial. And so religion is, it was part of our story, but now we can ignore it, he thinks. I don't agree with him. But it has a genetic basis that can be ignored. So those are our atheists looking at all that. Now, I'd like to look really at this interdisciplinary approach, which started with Eliade and the phenomenologist. When I was at Chicago, they actually believed one day they would find in the physical brain the center of the sacred. That seems a little naive. But Richie Davison at UW-Madison has found out, well, there's not going to find a sacred center in your brain. He has found that religion governs the whole neural net. And he's proven that. Actually, the Buddha, he says, was right about the no-self doctrine. There's no James Powell like a homunculus in here, where we'll find that pure guy who's running this thing like a machine. That's an old view of religion. So where does the sacred live? And we see these general patterns across whole societies, and this was his genius. Every society has sacred figures, sacred places, objects, times, and the like. And so when it comes to something like the abortion issue, a phenomenologist doesn't seek to decide who's right or who's wrong, but rather to describe the different positions that exist. So, in this case, in Japan, for example, on the abortion issue, they will offer a little service to the aborted fetus. So basically, in essence, says, sorry, pal, we can't afford you right now, but if you don't mind coming back in a couple of years when husband has a better job, then there you go. And that's as controversial as abortion is. My knowledge, a whole book called Liquid Life on this topic. Not an issue. So we describe that, and we find, again, a diversity of views. It's not that human life isn't sacred in both cultures, but how abortion is viewed is different. And then, when we look at theists in this country, this is murder. That's an old Christian perspective, too, this right to life issue. Early Christians in the Roman Empire would pick abandoned Roman babies and raise them as Christians off the rubbish heaps. That was the Roman way, to get rid of your kid. You just hope somebody might take care of it. Well, the Christians did that. So this is ancient with that. And we want to respect their idea of the sacred, that what you're really doing is killing a soul that now has no chance but is doomed to eternal damnation because you murdered it. So two very different perspectives on the sacred and death. And as I say, it's not for me about right or wrong, but understanding is critical. Now that brings us to gender studies, and Mary Daly, she was really one of the heavy hitters for feminism. And we can't deny half the planet, actually a little more than half the planet. Even though women don't appear as the great superheroes, guess what? All those superheroes have mothers. Now that might still be putting women in second class, right, status. But they're there in the picture. And so as we look at Taoism, I think we got to find ways where women have played roles in religion. When it comes to the abortion issue, I don't think I have to say too much, since all that has been in the news about old white guys judging how women can take care of their bodies, right? So gender studies will say, look, things have to change. It's another way to analyze religion and pull out that half the population who have created these religions we saw on that original map. And then that brings us to the, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar man, right? We've got a lot of funny views, but one of them is just true, I think. For a lot of people, religion, psychologically speaking, is about infantile delusions. And so if we look at the abortion issue, we're some people who cling to God like the father they didn't really have, the substitute father, if you will, who undergirds their ego in society. Then those kind of people, I like to personalize things. My ex-mother-in-law was raised at an orphanage, kidnapped by her father, and then re-kidnapped by her mother, and there's no talking to her about God. There is one way, a particular form of Lutheranism, and everyone else, sorry to tell you, you're all doomed to eternal hellfire. I realized some time ago that you don't actually want to challenge someone with that kind of view where the idea of God or the sacred is undergirding their personality. You don't want to do that because they're not ready for that. And so Freud's right about religion to that extent. We might say he's right about most people even. Let's leave that judgment to you. But there is someone to the rescue in psychology, and that would be Erik Erikson. And so if we think about euthanasia, our next topic, you know, those following Freud's kind of model of God says no, it's no. For Erik Erikson, he said, well, Freud, you're right, but only this much, right? If early trust is not developed as a child, and mistrust, abandonment, neglect is there for a kid, then they're going to get Freud's kind of model of religion. But Erik Erikson said, hey, there's a baby in the bathwater of religion, and who or what is that? People he thought like Martin Luther, wrote a whole book on Martin Luther, how he ascends these stages of psychological development, and there's no doubt about it. With Martin Luther's Bible, we get German literature, we get really a reshaping of all of European society, and we also get like a giant war out of it, don't we, Catholics and Protestants? European Civil War. Someone once asked Marty, why should we study religion? And he said, because people fight and kill about religion, and that's why we study it, not makes better people, but more aware people. And so the Buddha is another case, a world-shaping giant. When we look at the bubbles on that map, they all go back to individual people. It's hard to imagine Jesus or the Buddha or Muhammad. Those bubbles aren't just out of nowhere. They go back to the individual minds, the idea of the sacred of individuals who shape whole chunks of our planet. So I think he's right too. And then the psychologically advanced person might well say, hey, I've lived a good life. Maybe I have cancer. Maybe life has had its run. And euthanasia then might be an option for a psychologically mature person. So those are two aspects of the euthanasia argument. That brings us to these guys. And so we look at economics and religion. And then think of capital punishment. Who mostly is executed by the state? Is it our rich guys? I like to think of the law code of Hammurabi. If a big man kills a little man, he'll pay a fine of some shekels. But if a little man kills a big man, public torture and execution is what it gets out of that. So we can say the big man, but two different views once again. For Karl Marx, religion is a way of the rich to steal money from the poor, and their targets were the medieval Catholic Church in both cases. They have two views on this. For Karl Marx, the peasant pays money and it goes to build beautiful cathedrals in Rome and to fill the coffers of the Borgia popes and the like. And then that's certainly true. We can look at the Indian case, where the Brahmins are the best educated and the warriors tend to get the government and police jobs. Merchants, it's a pyramid, like on our dollar bill, right? Symbol of Mosaic oppression. And so he's right about that. The poor are executed through capital punishment, and the rich get off, right? We know cases, lots of them, where you get the lawyer and you're off. Max Weber had a different view, but they're going to agree, I think, on this one. He thought, well, hey, Karl Marx, yes, religion does function, as you say. But then, since he's a Protestant, he finds Protestantism shook up the medieval Catholic economy through an emphasis on the individual striving, a focus religiously and on the sacred for people now judged from Scripture and their relationship with God, directly bypassing the hierarchy and the clergy. And so we can credit Max Weber. Now he's in his cage. He says we're all in rationalist cages in the modern world and encumbered by bureaucracy. He doesn't think industrialization was great, but he does trace it back to especially the Calvinists, and in this country, of course, as I noted, who are the presidents? Well, they're Presbyterians and they're Congregationalists, even the current president. And how many Catholics, I like to ask students? Anybody know? One is the answer. And yet, so many Catholics. It's the largest single denomination in our culture. Mario Cuomo didn't want to run for president. He said he didn't want to put up with all the you're worshiping the Pope kind of thing. So Max Weber shows how religion can rejuvenate economies. And then we look at the caste system with regard to Marx, but also the giant faith for Weber also puts an emphasis on individuals striving, not on the Brahmin priests or the Vedas, the sacred scriptures or gods. So two ways in which we could look at capital punishment from both sides, and yet still these guys will agree that the rich tend to get off. And so Peter Berger brings us to the topic of war. And Peter Berger is the guy we can credit with the social construction of reality. And so if we think about it, everybody, every religion, everyone in this room is a socially constructed person. Why do we speak English here and not German or Chinese? Because of what I like to call the dread British Empire. And the British Empire spreads its language and culture across the planet as we know to this country. And so when we look at this map as sacred canopies, where he has these three processes, where the superhero Muhammad or Buddha or Jesus, they state a new message, or new-ish, based on prior stuff, of course. From their minds, they externalize a new vision, and then that vision is objectivated by their followers into scriptures that then create socially constructed people for centuries and across millennia and across whole continents. And so when we look at war, and let's get the laser on it, here are the dread northern barbarians, or the Han Chinese. Warfare for more than 2 millennia between these vast cultures. We won't see Confucianism among the barbarians, but we will see Buddhism as a civilizing force for those cultures. They civilized, it doesn't mean made them better. It means they became literate, developed government structures and institutions because of Buddhism. And then likewise, this one we know better, don't we? The ongoing struggle between the Europeans and the Semitic world. And it predates Christianity and Islam. Back to the days when the Hittites conquered Babylon, we've got a conflict between Indo-European cultures and the Semitic cultures. And if we understand this, I always say our government desperately needs a religion advisor, because the way you calm a religion, you don't fight it. You might as well mess with a bumblebee hive. If you want to make them mad, start whacking at their beehive. We'll find out what they do. They'll sting you to death. And when you mess with the beehive of a religion, you're going to make it stronger. So the trick with religions is you give them money. And when you give them money, they go away. And what's the evidence? Well, look at Scandinavia, where the government gave a lot of money to churches to build hot tubs, rocks, concerts, band stages. That's what they do. Their churches are empty of believers, but vibrant, community-centered. And where in Europe is Christianity, for example, strongest? Anybody know? It is the old Soviet Union, where they tried to stomp it out for centuries. Russia's more Christian by far than Denmark or Sweden or the Netherlands. It's because they tried to beat up on Christianity, and that's why it's big today. So that is where war is addressed through sociological analysis, if we remember that we're still going back to Eliade's notion of the sacred in our mind. And that's where all this comes from individuals. All right, then. I'll take questions. Hostile ones are welcome. I always like hostile questions, if there are any. Yes?
As in front of the class, when you don't want to deal or challenge someone who has religion as part of their personality, what do you do when you have students, or maybe even a room full of students, whose religion is part of their personality?
That's a good question. Well, I was just sharing this story. It was a famous notion where my class content was disturbing a very fundamentalist student. She said, my minister doesn't agree with any of that. And I said, well, let's bring him in. Let's give him a voice. Let's represent your view here. And he came in. I had 3 atheists at the time, though, and you know, after the presentation by the minister, one of my atheists, Casey, just got quite irate and said, you mean billions and billions of people are going to burn in hell forever because they don't believe like you do? And he said, I don't like it, but it's God's will. And so, you just have to be sensitive to that, give them a voice. And I think at the end of my class, they believe, which I do believe sincerely, I really don't care their view as long as they know these other views, but it's inherently going to be conflicting, and it should, because as they say about learning, if you're in your comfort zone, you're not learning. And so this brings them into their discomfort zone. It's not a class they have to take, and you know, I'm not sure what to say, but you want to give them a voice. So I have in-class debates at the end of each unit, Indian religions, Chinese, and the Abrahamics. And then they get their turn to express themselves as peer-to-peer assessments. And that's what I want to do. I want the Christian view to get out there, the Muslim view in particular, because we know so little about this culture that is, in fact, as I'm sure we all know, more like Christianity than any other religion. I mean, it's the Confucians they should be hating, if anyone. Those guys are scary. I mean, really scary. Does that help?
Are you looking for them to understand different faith perspectives or simply acknowledge them?
Oh, I want them to understand. And I felt like with this particular student, she was relieved that her pastor got to speak in class. And but also, I think the atheist kind of did run through the ringer, and she seemed like a little more open after that. I think it opened her up. And had I not allowed that voice to speak, then she would have been frustrated and think that I'm a biased guy who's just pushing an agenda, because I'm really not. There are babies in the bathwater of all these religions. And there's bathwater in every one of them, too. Any other questions?
So what is, you say you don't at all address the Abraham faith in the beginning, is that correct?
I wait till the end.
Okay, so how do students react when you hurl this new stuff?
They are, actually, it depends on the religion. They're a bit befuddled by Buddhism because so many concepts involved in that faith. They're amazed that the Jains eat only fruits and nuts and don't believe in potatoes. The Hindu gods and goddesses throw them because, they mirror human personalities. That's what I showed them. It's true for the gods and goddesses. And I made them do an online quiz. Which Greek god or goddess are you? That matches with the prior Myers-Briggs I have them take. So then sometimes the correlation is there for them personally. Oh, I scored Aries and I'm also an ESTJ. I figured that out. But that's the idea. So that they build them up. It's like a spiraling upward in class. We look at religion, but this way it's not so threatening, I think, to just start with the Abrahamics and then be looking at Freud and all. This way we work up to it, and they see me give the same treatment to the other religions, so they can't really complain if I'm applying those theories to theirs. And that's probably why I structured it like that. And frankly, a lot of religion textbooks do also. Any other questions?